Nicole from Nicole Omar, and today we are going to make this with this kit. It's pretty simple. It's a beginner project. We mostly will do what's called a back stitch all the way around. Get comfortable, get some tea, turn on some music, your favorite podcast or your favorite show. Just make it an experience. And let's do this. In order to make this, we are going to need this, and I'll show you what it contains. Fabric with the pattern printed on it, a hoop, thread with all the colors you need, the needles. First step, we're going to put this fabric into this hoop. So you're going to unscrew this and put the inner hoop down in front of you. Take your pattern fabric and center it as well as you can, but don't worry too much about it. And then you're going to take that outer hoop and press it on top. Then we're going to start to tighten the screw, but you're going to want to kind of pull the fabric tight as you go. Next, we are going to choose which color we're going to go first. Now on mine, I did this kind of blue-green color here, this kind of sagey green over here, but really you can do whatever colors you want on whatever leaves you want to. So I'm going to start with this one right here. So I'm going to use this color. So I'll just take that right out of that little notch. I am going to use that whole length of thread, but each strand of embroidery floss actually has 6 little strands in it. I'm going to separate that into 3 strands. So I'm going to just kind of work the end of this until it starts to separate a little bit. And then I'm going to find 3 strands and 3 strands, and then I'm slowly going to pull it apart without letting it knot up. So let the end unravel, let these ends unravel, and slowly just keep going until we just have those 3 strands of thread. It's really easy to get knots at this point, so make sure that you're being really careful. If you can tell that it's knotting up, you want to stop and figure out what's going wrong. Really, the more you can let the ends kind of dangle and unravel on their own, the easier it's going to be. Okay, so I have my strands. I'm going to set the other strands aside in case I need it later. And then now it's time to thread our needles. So I'm going to take one of these needles. The reason you have 2 is just because it's really easy to lose embroidery needles. Okay, threading your needle might be the hardest part, but you can do it. Here's some tips. First thing, you don't want to lick the thread. You want to bite it flat so that it fits in the eye of the needle. So I'm going to bite it flat. Twist those threads. We just did a lot of unraveling, so they might have kind of come undone. And then I'm going to go ahead and bite it again. Check to see if there are any little frayed fibers at the end. I know you can't see that. And I want you to cut it so that it's really, really blunt. The biggest tip I can give you is don't get frustrated. Don't let the needle and thread be stronger than you, and believe that you can do it. So as you're doing it, you have to just like know in your soul that it's going to work. If you have any doubt, I'm biting it flat again. If you have any doubt, that's when it's not going to work. You did it. Okay, so you don't want to pull it all the way through. You want to pull it through just about like 6 to 8 inches, and you're going to have that little tail there. And then on the other end, so I have my needle end, and then all the way on the end of that long tail, I have the other end. I'm just going to tie a knot right here. So now I'm just going to pick a leaf, and we're going to start on the back. You always want your mess to be on the back, so that's what we're going to do. And we are going to use the needle. If you have it at a parallel with the fabric, then it's going to be easier to find your spot, because if you're just trying to like poke your way through, you're going to put up a lot of holes in your fabric. So if you just have it, drag it along the fabric until you are exactly where you want to be. And you can start at any leaf. I'm just going to start at this one. And you're going to pull it through all the way until that knot hits the back of the fabric. And then you're going to do your first stitch. I'm going to keep my stitches pretty short here because there's lots of curves and edges. We are just going to be using what's called the back stitch. To do that, I'm going to come up about this far away, about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to pull my thread back through the fabric. And then I'm going to come back up that same length away that all the way through too. And then now, instead of, if I kept going the way that I'm going, I would have a broken line. I want to have a solid line. So I'm going to do this back stitch. So what that means is now, instead of going forward, I'm going to go backwards, and I'm going to go back down through the same hole from that previous stitch. So I'm going to go back down through that same hole, pull it all the way through. There's some extra fibers. Looks like I got caught on something back here. Oh, just from the white fabric. And then now I have this solid line going. So now my next move is going to be to come up a stitch length away again and then go backwards again. Stitch length away again, go backwards again. So I'm dragging my needle on the fabric, find that stitch length away, come all the way through, and then I'm gonna go back down through that, the whole of that last stitch. And then again, I have some fibers from the fabric. I'm just going to pull those out. Now I'm going to keep doing this all the way around this leaf, and I'll show you what I'll do when I need to do this sharp angle. Okay, now that I'm here and I want to do this line, I could either come up right there at the angle and keep going, but instead I'm really close right here, so I'm just going to come up a stitch length away again and then go backwards again. And then just keep going as if I didn't make a drastic turn. Now I'm finished with this leaf, and so now I'm going to jump to another leaf. I'm going to just keep stitching instead of tying this off and starting again. You don't want to do that too much, but here and there is totally fine. It looks like the distance between this line and this line is pretty close, so I'm just going to hop over and start doing this stitch, or this leaf. I'm going to do it on the back, so again, we always want to keep our mess on the back. So I'm going to drag my needle, find the beginning of that leaf, and I'm going to keep on stitching. Sometimes you might get a knot that shows up, and that's totally fine. It happens a lot. It's really, the thread will just keep twisting as you go. If it is a knot like this, where there is just this little loop right after the knot, sometimes it's kind of like a fake knot. So what I do is I will take my needle and slip it through those loops and then grab one side of the thread. If it doesn't pull, then I'll grab the other thread and it'll come out, and then I can just pop that knot out. If it's not working, then I would go in and really try and untie it like it's a real knot. But you want to make sure that you're not leaving knots or a bunch of extra thread on the back of your fabric, because you're going to run out of thread, plus it'll be a bigger mess than it needs to be. I just got another one. One thing I'm going to do is, to avoid this happening, is I'm going to just let this thread hang loose and let my needle kind of unravel. Okay, now I'm going to hop down and I'm going to start doing this leaf. One thing to keep in mind is make sure that your stitches are consistent. It doesn't really matter how long your stitches are. I wouldn't go too large or too small, but as long as they are consistent, then you're doing great. I would also make sure that the fabric is staying taut in your embroidery hoop. If it is starting to get kind of saggy or loose, it's worth it to go through and tighten up that fabric again. It's going to make it a lot easier for you, and it's going to make your final project look a lot better. If you make a mistake while you are stitching, don't try and feed your needle back through the hole that you went through to undo the stitch. Instead, what you need to do is just unthread your needle and then pull the stitch out. If you try to put your needle back through to undo the stitch, it's really likely that your needle will get caught up in the threads, like the fibers of the fabric, and cause a knot, a big mess, a lot of frustration. So make sure you just unthread your needle. I know it means you need to thread your needle again. You can do it. And then just pull that thread out and then put the stitch where you want it to go. All right, once you're finished with that, it's time to switch your thread color. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. You'll do this whenever you want to switch your color, or if your thread is only about 6 to 8 inches long, then you'll want to do this so that you can start with a longer piece of thread. So I'm going to go to the back of my embroidery. And then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to feed it underneath a stitch that's pretty close to where my thread's coming out of the fabric. And then I am going to pull it through. Make sure your needle's not going to the front of the fabric. So you're just sliding it right in between that stitch and the fabric. And then I'm going to pull it through. And what this is going to do is it's going to create this loop. So now my needle is going to go back through that loop that I just created and then pull it tight, and that's going to create a knot. And then I'm going to do that one more time to create a double knot. So I'm going to go underneath that nearest stitch again, creating that loop. And then I'm going to put my needle back through that loop, pull it tight. Now I have a knot. Now you don't want to cut the thread off right here at the knot because then it's going to eventually unravel and then come out. So instead I'm going to do what's called burying the thread. So I'm going to feed my needle underneath the stitches for about an inch or two, just to have a tail there after that knot. I'm just going to go around this leaf to keep things neat. And then once I've done that, I feel like there's a good tail there and it's not going to come undone, then I'll take my scissors and just cut that tail off. Now I'm ready to start with my next color. So I am going to do this bluish color for those other leaves, which is what I did here. So I'm gonna take a piece of that. Again, I'm just going to undo that and then pull off about a wingspan length, which is what is included in the kit. And then I get to do that fun step before where I separate it into just 3 strands. Then I get to thread the needle again. So I will twist those threads, bite them flat, use my scissors to make sure that it's a blunt edge. Believe that I can do it. Did it. So I'm gonna leave my little tail, go all the way over to that other edge, and then that's where I'm going to tie a knot. We're gonna start off just like we started before on the back. Remember, our mess is on the back. So I'm going to do this plant right here. So I'm gonna start again at the bottom and then just kind of work my way around. So I'm going to try and find this spot by dragging my needle, coming up right where I wanna start. Stitch length away. And then going right back into that back stitch. All right, I got the other plant all stitched up, and now I'm going to do the pot. So we're gonna do it just the same way as we did with everything else. I'm going to use the brown thread, so it's like a terracotta pot. But I'm just gonna start probably here and then work my way around and around and around and around, just like that. All we have left is this part right here, which is a little smaller, a little more detailed, a little bit trickier, but we've had so much practice that we should be fine. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm going to go back to that sagey color that I used for this, and I am going to do the 3 strands again and just go all the way up that stem, but I'm gonna go kind of in between these other areas. If you want to do the stem part at the end, you can do that too, because you kind of will fit it between all these other leaves and everything. Then for these leaves, I'll show you it finalized. I am going to just use 1 strand to do these tiny, tiny leaves, and then that way that they're going to be a little more dainty, a little more delicate. So when you separate your strands, you're going to separate just down to 1 strand of this embroidery floss, and then you're going to do those little leaves. And then the very last thing is this peachy, corally, orange, pink kind of color, and that's going to be these little blooms. So this is a stem blooming out of this succulent. I'm going to use 2 strands for these little blooms. So again, they're a little bit smaller, a little bit more delicate. If we were to use the whole piece of embroidery floss, this would all look really chunky. So I'm going to go ahead and do 2 strands for the flower, 1 strand for the leaves, and then the 3 strands for the stem. All right, we did it. All done, all stitched up. And now the last step is how are we going to display this? So you have a couple options. You can have it framed, you can stretch it like a canvas, or we can finish it off so that it can be hung in this embroidery hoop, which is really the most convenient, the easiest, so that's what we're gonna do. So what you're gonna need is grab your scissors, and I'm just going to cut this fabric in a circle around the hoop. You want to leave about 1 inch on the outside. All right, now you're gonna grab your needle again, last time, and any thread that you have a lot left over. I have this orangey color that we use for the flowers, plenty of it left, so that's what I'm gonna use. You're gonna thread your needle, tie a knot at the other end, just like you did before. And now we are going to stitch all the way around this using what's called the running stitch, which we didn't use in our project, but it's actually easier than the back stitch. So we are going to start on what's going to be the inside of the fabric, again keeping the mess on the back, or in this case the inside, because now we want this back part to be a little bit more neat. So I'm going to have that flipped up, and I'm going to put my needle through, maybe about 1/4 inch away, pull it all the way until that knot is up against the fabric. And now I'm going to just go around and do stitches. These do not need to be neat, they do not need to be pretty. I'm just going to go down a stitch length away. They also don't have to be tiny. I would make them a little bit bigger. And then come up a stitch length away. And now instead of going backwards like we did with the back stitch, we're just going to keep going. So we're going to have a broken line. You're gonna do that all the way around. Okay, then we want to make sure that this is all pulled tight. There's no loose gaps or anything, that our fabric is really taut. This is screwed on really, really, really tightly. And then we're just going to take that string and pull it so that all that fabric comes together in the back and you can no longer see it from the front. And then we're just going to tie a knot back here, just the same way as we did before, feeding it underneath the stitch. I'm going to pull it one more time, make sure that it's nice and tight, and then I'm going to put my needle back through that loop I made. Do that twice, bury the thread, and you are good to go. And that's it. We did it. It's all done. Let me know if you have questions. If you create this, please show me. Tag me. I'm on Instagram at Nicole Ioma, I-O-M-A. Please let me know. I really want to see it. And if you have any questions, let me know that too. Otherwise, good job.